welcome to our video. So, what we're doing today is I'm telling you a story. I'm telling you a story of women being spiritual leaders, and I seek to embrace and meet those consciousness through my travels, through the locations that they've been in, through the places that they are venerated in. And that has been my focus for many years. So you might have found me when I started my Meeting Mary Magdalene series. It's been beautiful to travel through south of France, where she lived after the crucifixion of Jesus. And to meet her and have her be my guide was wonderful. I then was guided to visit the many famous Black Madonnas of the center of France. And that was also a very beautiful journey, a very healing journey for me. Because this is not only about, gathering facts. It's actually a pilgrimage. It's actually an experience. It's an opening. It's a healing. It's many things that happen to me. And when I make those videos or I make those articles, anything that I do, it's to bring you a little bit of that frequency. I believe that, and I also witness that. I'm a healer. I do session on Zoom, and we really do not need to understand that distance and time is a limit to this type of work, to this type of transmission. Just witnessing something, connecting to it is enough. And so through my videos, all over this YouTube channel and all over my work in my school, on my website, it's always about bringing you things through my photos and my videos, bringing you energy, vibration, frequencies. So I've introduced you to Mary Magdalene, to the Black Madonna, to Mary in many forms that she embodies. Mary, the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, and lately we could also go into the mother of God herself, because I'm based in Istanbul and that's the future of my work. I've also introduced you to Sophia, who is the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of the gods and goddesses, like the creatrix, the goddess herself. And I represented her through her gigantic temple that is Hagia Sophia, which was a church, is a mosque, was a museum. It's a beautiful place of devotion. And I've also introduced you to many other things. If you go on my Patreon, you can see that I also met up with Sekhmet, who is an ancient Egyptian goddess, and really went through a whole experience during the summer and the fall of 2022, where she taught me lessons regarding sovereignty, regarding standing up for yourself, regarding standing up for your truth and embodying your highest vibration. And those words are little, I guess, but the reality of what it does to me, to my experience, is wonderful. So I hope that every one of those little documentaries, they help you, that they either connect with you in the moment that you watch them, or that it introduces you to a guide that you can then met up on your own time. So I'm mostly focused on women and feminine energy at the moment in those past few years, because I really feel androgynous. I've always been in between those two concepts of masculine and feminine, and I love both. I'm both, depending on the day, depending on the hour. And although my name is Capucine and I was assigned female at birth, I do feel like I respond to both depending on the days, depending on my emotions, on my mental states. And I've been criticized as not being feminine enough by my peers, by my family, and I never found feminine guides that, felt like me or embodied what I wanted to become. It was difficult for me to feel safe in the expression of femininity, because the representations that a lot of the media gives us is just one shade of femininity, and it's not my shade. So I've been trying to find guides, to find mentors that could help me to connect with something that looks and feels like me, or guide me into, you know, for example, Sekhmet, standing up for myself, and to really embody my own wisdom and my own force, not force, but my own strength, my own resilience, in a way that felt like me, that felt like it was aligned with my values, my moral values, my ethics, and at the same time didn't feel like what we see when men do it, or when certain men do it, or the way it's been overly portrayed in our cultures. So this journey through finding and seeking out guides that are of feminine energy, even though I'm sure, you know, and I know they are both as well, it's just a way for me to understand more. And I know that I'm not the only one here, so I hope that this serves you. The fact that they are either, you know, spiritual leaders, goddesses, gods, you know, like different entities that have to do with the spiritual realm, for me it helps me with my work, because I'm a journalist, photographer turned healer, and this has been happening in a few years, and I don't really have a template for what I'm doing. And because a lot of women are erased from history, I'm looking out for them. I know that they've been here, and I've been reading countless books that were published by women in the 12th century, 13th century. I'm trying to find all the mystics and to connect with them and to understand what they had to say. And sometimes those books are highly mystical and filled with symbolisms, and they kind of offer me glimpses and little doors for me to meet the sacred. And sometimes they're seeped into hardcore Christianism, let's say, like the very difficult parts of Christianity that really sought out to make everyone a servant of that religious concept. And it's very difficult to read those, so a lot of my research is not seen because I don't want to share about that. Like I see those things and I'm like, those ideas are difficult for me, and I don't want to give attention and help give attention to those books. So today we are talking about Genevieve, Sainte Genevieve, and we don't have words from her. We only have the tale, the myth. We have places, we have locations. I'm taking you different places in Paris. I'm taking you through 2 years of going here and there according to what's happening in Paris and around Paris as well. She's from Nanterre, which is a city a little bit away from Paris, and I'm trying to meet her consciousness to see what's happening with her and to know more, to be honest, because you could read her Wikipedia page. That doesn't mean that you'll get to know the person, the consciousness, the presence. And that's also why I traveled when I went to see the Black Madonnas, Mary Magdalene. Like, I seek and I understand that there are vibration left from the past, if we understand time as linear, that are still an expression of that consciousness. So traveling to those places helps me to meet the space and to get a feel, and maybe to get an experience, maybe to get a communication and transmission. So welcome to this 2-year-long research while based in Paris about Sainte Genevieve, the patroness saint of Paris. So who is Geneviève? I'm gonna say her name in French because it's so beautiful. So she was born in 420 in Nanterre, which was a pretty big settlement of humans since the Neolithic, I think. They actually found a lot when they were doing archaeological... I mean, they were not doing archaeological research, but they were building things, and then they kept on finding a lot of settlements that were more ancient than Paris, so that was kind of fascinating. Nanterre is not far away from Paris, and as a child, we have to set ourselves in the context that, and Paris was not the Paris that you know. It was just this tiny island, l'île de la Cité, and it was just that little island, and people had been living there. It had been called Lutetia before. So Genevieve was Christianized, she believed, and a few miracles happened around her when she was a kid. So that's part of the myth, and I want to introduce a disclaimer here right now. You can do a lot of research, and it's something that dates from the 5th century, all right? So there's a lot of different versions, there's a lot of different tales. So she's baptized quite early on, and she finds herself to be very religious, very connected to God, to the sacred. And so much so that 2 people that were on their way to Britain noticed her. There's a few miracles around her, and one that I'm gonna tell you, but it's not proven. But anyway, those 2 people that see her are Saint Germain d'Auxerre and Saint Louis de Troyes, and they were both going to England. And they are very important people from that time that were, on a mission to Christianize as many people as possible and to share the good news, the fact that, the Messiah had come. So the little tale that I'm going to tell you is not super proven, but it's really part of her cult. When she was a kid, apparently her mom was not great to her and was actually very evil to her, and God decided to punish that mother for her deeds by making her blind. So Genevieve lived next to a well, and she told her mom to put her hands through the water and to rub her eyes with that water, and that gave her sight back. So that shows that this little kid was, 1, very forgiving, and 2, she had abilities. She just made a miracle happen. So that's part of her tale, and I went there. Through my research, I realized that the well was still kept. It was still a place that people came to put water on their eyes and to expect that miracle. So it was very interesting. So I took a train and I went outside of Paris, and I saw the church that they had built for her, and to witness where she had lived according to their tale, their research, and to witness that beautiful kind of modern church with the well, and then with a few stairs that go down and take you to a smaller crypt that you could pray to. And by going there, I really felt her presence. That's actually the only space that I really felt her presence, and that was my first encounter with her, and it was wonderful. I got the chance to buy one of those little candles. If you've been watching my videos, you know that I try to deepen my connection to consciousnesses, to guides, to mentors through the physical visits that I do, when I travel, but also the little physical objects that I can get. So I was able to grab one of those little candles with her image on it, and then to just go through my own prayers at home in the dark with that candle. So that's just that little tale. She has her story told quite close after her death in the 6th century, and that's really what I base whatever I'm telling you now. Everything that I'm telling you from the tale is based on that text and not based on anything else that people added up to it centuries and millenniums after. So she was actually from quite a rich family, a Gallic and Roman family. She was their only child, so she inherited their money, and she moved to Paris with that money and with that desire and conviction to stay close to God and to stay connected and within that sacred life that she wanted to have. So she didn't become a nun and she didn't marry. She just had influence from the status of, the money that she had, which was quite unusual at the time for, a woman to have that money, and to be free, to not be married or, to be owned by a man. And she moved to Paris. So Attila, the leader of the Huns, came and was on his way to Paris, and everyone freaked out because they knew of, the kind of ravaging and pillaging that was happening. A lot of people freaked out and wanted to leave Paris, just abandon and leave with their things. And she apparently said, quoting again the text, "May let the men escape if they are wanting to, or if they are too tired to fight. Us women, we will pray so much so until God hears our demands, our supplications, our prayers. And to see someone so strong and so convinced that something could happen, people stayed. And they stayed in Paris, and Attila didn't come to Paris. He didn't even walk into the city. They went on the side, they walked around it, and then they went back somewhere else. But that's what happened. And there's a rumor that's not part of the original text, but there's a rumor that she spread a rumor that would go all the way back to the ears of Attila, that Paris was infested with the cholera. So that's a rumor, that's just what I'm saying here, but that's never been proven. So that was 451, she was 28, and she had braved and faced Attila the Hun, like most famous guy ever. She didn't meet him head on, that was never proven, but you know, she stayed in her city and she kept people inside and kept them motivated to stay and pray. That's very beautiful. So that was the first of her feat. In 465, Childeric I, who is at the time the king of the Franks and was moving from city to city and trying to, extend his kingdom, held a siege around Paris. And the Franks were the people who invaded France. We were the Gallic people. Our country was called La Gaule, and we had been invaded by the Romans, as I said before, and now the Franks were here. Paris, who was, held under siege, so at some point you don't have food anymore. You don't have sustenance for the people to stay strong and stay closed and don't let the invader come through. And what she did is that, as I told you, Paris was just that little island. It was small. It was surrounded by water. And with her resources, under the guise of night, she actually took boats. And she traveled to other villages unseen, managed to go outside of the city, grab a lot of food and bring it back as a way to continue staying closed off and not letting the Franks gain sovereignty over the city. Everywhere I went regarding Genevieve, one of her symbols is a boat. She holds a boat, which represents the city of Paris, because the island itself is seen as a boat. The island of Paris, that was Paris then, is seen as a boat on the water. So she became, afterwards, centuries later, the patroness saint of Paris, because she had been loved, embraced, and celebrated then by the Parisian people, and still was after and after and after. Childeric I was actually the father of Clovis, and Clovis is the first king of France. What they say is that she approved of him. I don't know how much political power she had at that time to be able to say, yes, you. But basically, he had been baptized. She instated him and his wife Clotilde, and the three of them were in power at that time over France. She lived a long life and she died around 502 or 512, and there was a lot of different illustrations that I saw where you kind of feel like the whole of Paris is around her and seeing her to her death. So that's what we know of her. Later on, Paris continued to celebrate her as the patroness saint, as the protector of the city, as the one who had protected them against 2 invasions, and had that sanctity around her with, her connection with God and miracles. And does her myth still live on? Is she still someone that we know of? So as I told you, when I moved in 2019, I didn't know much about her. I knew that, the Pantheon, which is a magical, gigantic church in Paris, where all the famous, extremely famous people who changed France through their discoveries, their books, their actions, like Voltaire, Diderot, Pierre and Marie Curie, Victor Hugo, all those very famous people are buried in the Pantheon. And that was originally built by Louis XV. He was sick, he was praying to Sainte Genevieve, and he said, if I make it to the other side of this illness, I'll build something for you on top of your mountain where you are actually buried on a church on the side. I'll build something amazing for you. And he did, and then the revolution happened a while after, and that church was never sanctified, never made a church, it was a building. So then it became the Pantheon where all the famous people started to be buried there. It became a church then, it was sanctified a little bit later, as in with the revolution in the 19th century. A lot of things happened in Paris between, we're secular people, now we're back to religion, now we're secular again, this and that, the separation of state and church. So on top, you actually visit the church that becomes an art space and has the pendulum of Foucault, which proves the rotation of the earth. And it's a beautiful space, but it also is covered in incredible paintings that tell you the tale of Genevieve. And I went there, I filmed it for you, and it's very interesting to see the different depictions of her, because what I'm not telling you is that one of the tale that people enjoyed adding on to her, and that was around the 15th century, that's really not something that you can find in the tales after, is that they kept on saying she was a shepherd. She was a young woman taking care of sheep and talked to by God. And that's something that we see in Joan of Arc as well, and that's not true. So she is represented all over the place with being in a field with sheep, and that's not true. She was a powerful woman with political power and a substantial amount of money, and she had influence. She actually did a lot politically. She was a counselor to this young king that was now ruling over Paris. She's buried with them as well. She's buried with Clovis and Clotilde, and whenever big things were happening in Paris, whenever there was a big plague, they would take her coffin out and they would pray to her and they would do a little celebration, and then they would put her back. So she's still there. So the reason why I'm doing this right now is that I moved to Paris not knowing much about her, right? And across different churches we could see those little banners that were saying it's been 1,600 years that Genevieve was born. She was born in 420, this is 2020, so we're celebrating that. And I was like, okay, what's going on there? Who's that? I'm rediscovering my own city, my own country, and I keep seeing her, those little bookmarks, those little leaflets here and there when I go to churches. And I don't go for mass, I'm just a tourist. and so I tried to get around her myth, her tale, and to search a little bit. And across that celebration that doesn't, say much, that doesn't do much, that's not really a major event, because we're a secular country now. The separation of church and state left such a mark. The influence of the Pope on France was so intense that a lot of people are not Catholic. They don't go to church. They're not very religious anymore. There's still a community, but it's not what it was to be, or not what we think of when we think of France. So Sainte Genevieve is totally forgotten, except the few that know, the few that go to church. But she is the patron saint of Paris. She is and was such an important consciousness for people. And for me to search that and to realize how people didn't know anything about her, and I was kind of sharing anecdotes here and there with friends, and not much was coming back to me, not much interaction was exchanged. I was shocked. This is a badass woman, right? She has a really cool tale. She opposed 2 invasions to Paris. She had political power. And it was fascinating to be like, come on, there's something here. So I found this reenactment of her tale and myth within the church that she's buried. So I went there on a summer night, and it was very fascinating to see that there were still a community of people that was into this myth, into this real, I keep saying myth, that were into her story and to the historical facts of her life. And I'm gonna let you enjoy that. That she's present at is on this bridge, le Pont de la Tourelle, and she is this gigantic pillar that holds a kid that then holds a boat. Fluctuat nec margitur, which means we float but we don't sink, is that representation of the boat. And the emblem of Paris that you see everywhere, on top of every school, on top of every town hall, or every official building, is that emblem that has evolved through the centuries. And it's a boat, and it's a boat with two colors, the red and the blue, and they represent the notes who were the richest people in Paris. They had the power because, as I told you, Paris was an island, so you needed to take boats. So they had those specific colors and those specific hats, the red and the blue, and they had a lot of power. Those merchants, they had a lot of power, a lot of money, so they are a huge influence on Paris, and they are still kind of present. One of the oldest artifact of Paris is that Pilier des Notes, that column that you can find at the Musée du Moyen Âge. It's called the Musée of Cluny. I highly recommend it if you go to Paris. It's in a beautiful building that just renovated it. It's wonderful. And that pillar of the notes is a very famous pillar that represents those people and the different gods and the different religion that existed close to one another in that time, where people still had, you know, the Celtic gods, the Gallic gods, and the Roman gods. To visit and to see that the boat, which is so symbolic of Sainte Genevieve, so symbolic of, you know, when she took those boats and brought back the food, even though she's not very present to the collective consciousness, she's still here. She's still present and prevalent. She's still important, and I wanted to share her story right now with you. If she guides you to stand up and protect the people around you, and to stand up for your values, and to be guided by your faith, whichever it is, I hope that she can be a guide for you, and that this video can be a motivation for you to renew that deep down calling that you have. Thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. Maybe give this video a little like. Maybe you can comment something that you enjoyed. What was the thing that you most enjoy, and do you have such a guide in your own culture, in your own city, tell me about it. I want to know more. I know that there are. There is so much more on my Patreon waiting for you. So we have exclusive videos that are not released here. And if you'd like to come and visit, it's just here. The link is in the description. Bye. Take care. Au revoir.